Joining me now is Michael Patrick Lynch. He's the author of Know It All Society, Truth and Arrogance in Political Culture. Michael, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
No problem. Michael, your guest know-it-alls. Normally I would agree with you, except there's one important exception, me.
Wait a second, me too, buddy. Write about what you know.
Yeah. So I am actually going to make a little bit of an argument about that in a second, because I literally did a show in Miami called Know It All. That was the actual title. Okay, but Michael, first let's get to our agreements. You lay out the problem, and then we'll discuss both the overall issue and some parts where I actually do have a little bit of a bone to pick. So why is there more of a know-it-all society today than there has ever been?
I think it really comes down to a sort of toxic mix of human psychology, technology, the way we use our social media platforms, and that's certainly new, and a political ideology that's feeding off of this combination of technology and psychology. I think that the particular ideology that it's most prominently using this toxic mix is right now on the right. But in the book, I talk about the fact that this is a human problem. I mean, look, the issue here is that we're living at a time in which of incredibly unsettled norms, not just democratic norms, but norms of evidence of what counts as a fact. And you would think normally that in unsettled times, people might be more cautious about what they think. But what actually we're seeing is something of the reverse. And part of that is due to the fact that having strength of your convictions is something that is very, very rewarding to all of us as human beings. And in addition to that, we're attracted to people who claim that they know, that they have the secret of the universe figured out. And I think that sort of reward and that attraction can really feed into, as I said, the tendency of some politicians right now, and particularly the resident of the White House, to tell people that, look, just never mind the facts, just follow what I say, because we know and they don't. This is a politics, not so much as us versus them, but it's a celebration of a politics of us over them. And I think it's a really dangerous phenomenon that we're seeing right now, not just in the US, but across the globe.
So of course I agree with that. And when it comes to celebrating facts and research, et cetera, I'm awesome at it. No, I'm kidding. You're of course absolutely right. But so let's have fun and let's get to the disagreement, because look, Michael's the director of Humanities Institute and professor of philosophy at the University of Connecticut. He's even got a medal for research excellence. So that's the kind of arrogant guy I am that I'm going to challenge him nonetheless. So Michael, the problem though is that we have a mainstream media that normalizes everything and equates everything. So it's not that they don't point out Trump's faults, they do, which I'm encouraged by, because in the past they have not pointed out the faults of Obama or George W. Bush or Dick Cheney or Mitch McConnell or Pelosi nearly enough. But still there's this instinct to call everything even. And that's actually counterfactual. And so oftentimes one side is more right than the other and has access to more facts and information and is correct. So I'm worried about saying, hey, nobody's a know-it-all, because no, especially in today's America, one side clearly knows better than the other.
Look, the thing about arrogance, which is what I'm talking about, is that it's attractive because it gives you the feeling of knowledge without real knowledge. So what I'm talking about is not somebody who actually knows a lot of stuff. I mean, lots of people do know things. You know a lot of stuff. On Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, I seem to know some stuff. Tuesdays and Thursdays, I forget it completely. But the point is not about expertise or people who have command over the facts. I mean, if you think about just the way we ordinarily use the term, a know-it-all is somebody who confuses their concern for their ego with truth. And what's the phenomenon I'm interested in is when that sort of phenomenon, that personal psychological phenomenon, goes global or tribal, where we start to say, well, our side, our particular ideology is right in claiming this particular, making this particular judgment, just because we're making it, not because the evidence supports it. So I think I'm actually completely in agreement with you that a lot of the problem right now in the media is they aren't actually often challenging, I think, the factual claims or the lack of factual claims that are being made elsewhere in the internet. And they're also sometimes, I think, that some of the problem is remaining silent about what are actually the true causes or the root phenomena that's going on, including, for example, I think it's only in the last few 24 hours or so that I think people have really started to come out and say clearly that the shootings over the weekend were done out of an ideology that tells people that we know, in fact, that there are caravans coming, that there are immigrants crossing the border, there is an invasion. This is an ideology that is rooted in a sense that we know the facts as they are, when in fact it's not really based on any sort of factual information at all. So arrogance is a confusion of ego and truth. I don't think it's really a concern for truth at all. The know-it-all is concerned with themselves, not with the facts.
Right. So look, kidding aside, would I be arrogant about physics? Absolutely not. I'm actually pretty bad at physics, and so that's the last thing I would be, is to claim that I know everything about physics. And that's exactly what you get with Donald Trump. He keeps saying, and we even ran a clip once about how no one knows more than me, and just fill in the blank. He said it about 80 different things, and of course none of it is true. My particular expertise happens to be politics, so I wouldn't back down from saying yes, I have greater knowledge than pretty much every Republican in the country. Okay, but that's because that's my job and we're pretty good at it. But I want to know how we get past these things, because you can't throw up your hands and say, well, nobody knows anything. No, climate scientists do know better than non-climate scientists. And 99% of the climate scientists agree that climate change is real and it's man-made. That is super relevant, right? So you can't go to the scientists and go, oh, Mr. Know-it-all. Yeah, that's kind of their job to know that, right? And at the same time, you're right that there's this enormous phenomenon, very much buttressed by Donald Trump, that don't worry about the facts. If I say it, it's true. That's it. That's all you need to know. So how do we figure out, if you're online, and especially so if you're a progressive, because it's so hard to get through the knucklehead Republicans, but how do you make sure you don't fall into that same trap of arrogance?
Well, here's one thing I would suggest right off the bat. We haven't talked about technology right now. I've mentioned it briefly, but I think one thing we really all got to get better at, and that includes we progressives, is that we need to be able to realize what we're doing when we're engaging with each other online about the politics of the day. A lot of time, let me take an example. I share something, some news story, something that I've read in The Guardian, for example. So I share it online, and to myself and to my friends, it looks as if what I'm doing, and the reason I'm doing it, is that I want to share some facts, or at least some interesting article, some piece of information. I'm engaging in a sort of rational discourse with my friends, and I'm trying to point out something important to them. In many ways, I am doing that. On the other hand, what do we know about what we do when we share things online? Well, the research tells us that almost no one who shares something online with regard to politics actually reads the thing that they're sharing. Almost no one does. And of course, you and I do. We read everything, all the sources, all that. We've read everything we've ever shared. And all the listeners, of course, are like that. But there are other people that don't read what they share. We've heard about them. Those people actually are the majority of people, and that includes the majority of progressives and conservatives. There's nothing different politically as far as the current research is telling us. What does that tell us? Well, that tells us that really part of what we're doing when we're interacting with each other online is actually expressing our emotions. We're signaling to each other that we're part of the same group. There's nothing wrong with that per se. But you know what is wrong? What's problematic is when we don't know that's what we're doing. When we think what we're doing is just sort of sharing information factually, but often what we're doing is just engaging in a sort of an expression of outrage or an attempt to try to signal to each other that, hey, I'm on your team too. And that sort of lack of knowledge about what we're really doing when we're online can sometimes be taken advantage of. And that includes those of us on the left. I mean, in the 2016 election, this sort of lack of knowledge of what we're actually doing online was something that was, we now know, very much taken advantage of by state actors and people wanting to corrupt our political system. I'm talking about, of course, Russians and not just the Russians. Cambridge Analytica. And, the thing is that when you don't know what game it is you're playing, when you think that what you're doing is playing in a game of like reason and fact, but really what you're doing is playing a different game that has the rules of the water cooler or the playground, that's when you can be taken advantage of. And that's something that I think everybody, including progressives, really need to pay attention to.
Yeah, so again, here I'm a bit of an exception, but only because if I tweet something out and I haven't read every word in it and there's something wrong in the 37th paragraph, I will take all of the blame. So I have to be.
But again, that's because of what you do for a living, right?
Yeah.
This is what you do for a living. Most of us don't do what you do for a living, and most of us, including myself, couldn't do what you do because we don't have your knowledge. And
there we go. Now we're getting it right. No, I'm kidding. So guys, the most important takeaway I think, and check out Michael's book. It's called Know It All Society. So read it for yourself and get a sense of it. But even if you think you're right, make sure you're double checking the facts. Because look, I've changed my mind politically 1,000 times throughout my life. And I started out as a Republican, here I am, one of the more progressive guys in the country. And the only way to do that is if you have access to information, facts, and knowledge. So even if you think you're right, make sure you double check and always look at the facts first. Michael, thank you so much for joining us, really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for watching this free clip of the Young Turks. Don't forget to become a TYT member today. For more exclusive content, join now at tyt.com/join.